A local stray cat in a Catholic parish in a small town where nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary, and the towering statue of Pope John Paul II. It was mid-service on a quiet Sunday morning at the local St. Gabriel's Parish in Pineview, when suddenly Salem, the local stray cat, rushed in during Mass, meowing frantically at the statue of Pope John Paul II jumping towards it. Everyone froze. What had caused the cat to act this way, and why had it fixed its gaze so intently on the statue to the point on jumping on it? Let's find out. The small town of Pineview was just stirring to life as the first rays of sunlight painted the rooftops golden. People went about their usual routines, their lives anchored by the rhythm of the church bell that rang every morning from St. Gabriel's Chapel, a modest stone church nestled in the heart of the town. Father Vincent, the parish priest, was preparing for morning Mass in the sacristy. His kind face bore the creases of years spent in service, his graying hair a testament to a life of dedication. He glanced at the chapel's newest addition, a statue of Pope John Paul II, which stood by the altar. It was a gift from an anonymous benefactor, sculpted with striking precision. Yet every time Father Vincent looked at it, he felt a faint unease he couldn't quite place. The faithful began trickling in, filling the pews with whispered prayers and quiet greetings. Among them was Alice, a school librarian with a warm smile, and Harold, the town's blacksmith, who had hands like tree meow, but a gentle heart. At the back of the chapel, Ruby, the choir leader, hummed softly as she arranged hymn books. Mass began as usual. Father Vincent's voice carried through the nave as he led the congregation in prayer. The serene atmosphere was interrupted by a sudden sharp sound. The chapel doors swung open with a thud. A cat darted inside, drawing startled gasps from the parishioners. This wasn't just any cat. Salem, as everyone in Pineview called him, was the town's beloved stray, a wiry mutt with reddish-brown fur. Salem was known for his cheerful, easygoing nature, but today something was different. His tail was stiff, his eyes wide with what seemed like alarm. Ignoring everyone, Salem bounded down the aisle, his claws clacking against the stone floor, and stopped abruptly in front of the statue of Pope John Paul II. Salem began meowing, loud, insistent meows that echoed off the chapel walls. People turned to one another, exchanging uneasy looks.
Salem, what's gotten into you?
Father Vincent called out, stepping toward the cat. Salem didn't budge, his gaze fixed on the statue, his meowing growing more frenzied.
Maybe he's just excited,
Alice whispered to Harold, though her voice carried uncertainty. Harold shook his head.
I've seen Salem chase his tail like a fool, but I've never seen him like this.
The meowing stopped as abruptly as it started. Salem pawed at the base of the statue, whining softly now. The congregation watched, frozen in silence. Then, as if startled by something only he could sense, Salem let out a sharp yelp and bolted out of the chapel. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Father Vincent cleared his throat, trying to steady himself.
Let us continue with the Mass,
he said, though his voice carried a hint of unease. But the incident lingered in everyone's minds, overshadowing the rest of the service. After Mass, Father Vincent couldn't resist investigating. Kneeling by the statue, he ran his hand over its base. His fingers brushed against something odd, a faint crack he hadn't noticed before. He leaned closer, squinting at the imperfection. It was too uniform to be natural. That night, sleep eluded Father Vincent. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the rectory, his mind replaying Salem's strange behavior. Around midnight, he got up and walked to his window. To his astonishment, there was Salem, sitting silently outside the chapel, staring intently at its doors.
Still watching, old boy?
Father Vincent murmured. A shiver ran through him, but he couldn't tell if it was from the chill in the air or the unease creeping into his thoughts. Across town, Alice sat in her armchair with a cup of tea, trying to shake off the odd events of the day. She nodded off, slipping into an uneasy dream. In it, she was standing in the chapel, but everything felt wrong. The statue of Pope John Paul II loomed over her, its carved face stern and unyielding. Then in a deep, gentle voice, it spoke.
Guard what lies beneath, do not let it wake.
She woke with a start. the dream leaving a cold knot of dread in her chest. Meanwhile, Harold was in his workshop, oiling his tools to quiet his restless thoughts. He'd helped install the statue weeks ago, proud to lend his strength to the church. Yet tonight, his tools felt different, as if they'd aged overnight. He rubbed his thumb over a hammer's handle, finding it unexpectedly brittle. The next day, Father Vincent gathered Alice, Harold, and Ruby after morning prayers. He recounted what he had discovered, a hairline crack at the statue's base, and shared his unease.
It might be nothing,
He said, though his tone suggested otherwise.
but Salem's behavior isn't something I can ignore.
Alice frowned.
I dreamed of the statue last night.
She admitted, her voice low.
It spoke to me. It said something's beneath it, something dangerous.
Harold nodded.
I don't trust coincidences. That cat knows something we don't.
Ruby, usually skeptical of superstitions, surprised them by speaking up.
Salem's no ordinary cat. My grandmother used to say animals see what we can't. If he's warning us, maybe we should listen.
As the group debated what to do, Salem appeared at the chapel doors, meowing insistently once again. It was as if he was urging them to follow. Father Vincent sighed.
Well,
He said, grabbing a flashlight.
let's see where this leads.
The group gathered tools, crowbars, chisels, and a lantern. Salem led them straight to the statue, circling it anxiously with trembling. Harold and Father Vincent began carefully prying at the base, guided by the crack. After what felt like an eternity, a section of the stone gave way, revealing a hollow space beneath. The air that escaped was cool and stale, carrying the faint scent of earth. Inside lay a small, weathered box, its surface etched with symbols none of them recognized. Father Vincent hesitated before lifting it out. The box felt unnervingly cold, even through his gloves.
Whatever's in here,
He murmured.
it's been hidden for a reason.
Salem whined softly, his tail wagging nervously. Alice stepped closer.
Should we open it?
She asked. The priest shook his head.
Not here. Not yet.
They locked the box in the rectory safe, agreeing to consult the diocese about its discovery. But as they left the chapel, Salem remained by the statue, his eyes fixed on the spot where the box had been. Father Vincent glanced back at the cat, a knot of worry tightening in his chest. Whatever they had unearthed, he was certain it had only scratched the surface of a mystery far greater than they'd imagined. The sun had barely risen over Pineview, casting a soft light across the small town. But inside St. Gabriel's Chapel, the air felt different, thicker, more oppressive. Father Vincent stood at the altar, his hands gripping the edge, his mind racing. The discovery of the box the night before had left him restless. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in the town, something much darker than he had first realized. Alice had arrived early as usual, but there was a tension in her step. The cat Salem, who had been such a mysterious presence in the chapel the day before, was nowhere to be found. It was strange. Salem had always been a fixture in the town, roaming the streets with the occasional visit to the church, but now gone without a trace, Father Vincent's unease only deepened.
Morning, Father.
Alice greeted, her voice soft but laced with concern.
Morning, Alice.
Father Vincent replied, turning toward her with a faint smile that didn't quite reach his eyes.
I've been waiting for you. The diocese is supposed to send someone today. We should hear back soon.
Alice nodded, though her gaze was distant. She wasn't just worried about the diocese's involvement. Something else felt wrong, something far more immediate. Father Vincent glanced over at the windows. The chapel's tall, stained glass panes, which usually depicted peaceful scenes of saints and angels, had transformed overnight. The sunlight that streamed through them now painted the room in eerie hues of red and green. But it wasn't just the colors. The images in the glass had changed. Alice's eyes widened as she took in the view. Where once there had been peaceful depictions of the Virgin Mary and St. Gabriel, now there were distorted faces, twisted, agonized expressions of men and women, some of them staring directly at the altar. Their eyes were hollow, empty. The figures seemed almost to shift, as though they were alive, trapped within the glass, trying to escape.
Father, look.
Alice whispered, her voice shaky.
What's happening to the windows? This isn't right.
Father Vincent's chest tightened.
I don't know, Alice. But this is no ordinary change. It's like they're alive.
He stepped closer to one of the windows, his hand hovering over the glass as if he could touch the figures. But when he reached out, the glass felt ice cold to the touch, sending a shock through his fingers.
They're watching us.
Alice said, a tremor in her voice.
The eyes, they look so real. It's like they're begging for help.
Father Vincent nodded but didn't speak. He felt a chill run down his spine. The windows had always been beautiful and serene, part of what made the chapel such a peaceful place. But now they felt like a prison, and the faces staring back from the glass seemed to whisper a warning that he couldn't yet understand. The sudden silence in the chapel was broken by the faint sound of the chapel doors creaking open. Father Vincent turned, expecting to see one of the parishioners arriving early for prayer. But there was no one. The doors were empty, and there was no sign of anyone outside. The door had opened by itself. Alice's eyes shot to the door.
Did you see that? The door, it just opened on its own.
Father Vincent's hand tightened on the altar railing. He could feel the weight of the moment. Something was happening, something neither of them could fully grasp. The box locked away in the safe was still the only tangible clue they had. But the changes in the chapel, the strange behavior of the cat, and now the unsettling transformation of the windows all seemed to point to a far greater mystery, and they were powerless to stop it.
Salem.
Father Vincent muttered under his breath, turning back to Alice.
Where did he go? He was here last night, guarding the chapel like he knew something was coming. And now he's gone. Just like that.
I don't know.
Alice replied, her voice tight with worry.
He's never just disappeared like this. He's always around. What does this mean?
Father Vincent couldn't answer. His thoughts were too jumbled. All he could do was stare at the windows, the figures moving within them like tortured souls. It felt as if the entire chapel were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen.
We have to wait for the diocese,
Father Vincent said, trying to gather his thoughts.
They'll know what to do. They'll send someone who understands what's going on.
Alice nodded, though her eyes never left the windows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching them. The room felt suffocating now, and it seemed as though the walls themselves were closing in. Suddenly, there was a sharp knock at the door. Father Vincent jumped, his heart leaping in his chest. He turned to Alice, but before he could say anything, the door opened on its own once again. But this time, someone was standing there. It was an elderly man, dressed in a dark suit and a black hat. His eyes were sharp, but his face was kind, and his expression was gentle. He had the air of someone who had seen far more than most people could ever imagine.
I'm Father Raphael,
The man said with a slight smile.
I was sent by the diocese. I understand you've had some unusual occurrences here.
Father Vincent blinked in surprise.
Yes, Father Raphael. Thank you for coming so quickly. We've been...
Distracted.
Father Raphael finished for him, his voice soft but firm. He stepped inside and Alice stepped back to give him space.
I can feel it. The energy in this place is unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Father Raphael stood in the center of St. Gabriel's Chapel, his eyes fixed on the windows. The figures trapped inside the glass had shifted again, their expressions twisted in ways that felt too real. Father Vincent and Alice had noticed it too, but Father Raphael didn't mention it. Instead, he seemed distracted, almost distant, his mind clearly somewhere else.
Father Raphael?
Father Vincent asked, his voice uncertain. Father Raphael blinked and shook his head as if coming out of a trance.
Yes, sorry. I'm just processing everything.
He gave a tight smile, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was holding back. Father Vincent didn't press him. The strange energy in the chapel was thickening, and he had enough on his mind already. Alice seemed to pick up on Father Raphael's unease, but she stayed quiet, her eyes darting between the windows and the priest. She was just as unsettled as he was, but there was something about Father Raphael's calm that made her wonder if he knew more than he was letting on.
Let's move to the safe,
Father Vincent said, trying to shake off the feeling that the walls were closing in around them.
We'll show you the box.
Father Raphael nodded, his movement stiff. He followed them toward the back of the chapel, where the small rectory safe stood, its heavy door closed, hiding the artifact within. The three of them stood before the safe, the tension in the air growing. Father Vincent unlocked the door with a soft click, and he and Alice both stepped back as Father Raphael approached. His eyes lingered on the safe for a moment, and there was a flicker of something like recognition, but he didn't speak about it. He took a deep breath before lifting the box from the safe and setting it gently on the altar. For a moment, he just stared at it, his eyes narrowing as if trying to decipher something hidden. He reached out to touch it, but his fingers hesitated just above the surface, as if the box itself was alive.
Father Raphael,
Alice asked, her voice hesitant.
are you okay?
Father Raphael didn't respond right away. He was staring at the box as if trying to piece together a puzzle. Then, as though he couldn't hold back any longer, he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper.
There's something about this. Something I've seen before.
Father Vincent's heart skipped.
What do you mean?
Father Raphael's face was pale now, his lips barely moving, as he slowly ran his fingers over the inscription etched into the side of the box. The ancient symbols seemed to hum under his touch, as if alive, a subtle vibration coursing through his fingertips. He hesitated for a long moment before speaking again, this time more clearly.
There's a warning here.
He said, his voice trembling slightly.
A curse.
Father Vincent took a step forward.
What does it say?
Father Raphael's eyes widened as he read the inscription aloud, his voice heavy with fear.
The darkness will awaken when the seal is broken. The stone calls to those who seek power, and those who answer will find themselves consumed. Only the keeper can undo the damage, but the price will be paid in blood.
Father Raphael's voice faltered on the last words, and his hands dropped from the box as if it had burned him. He took a step back, his face pale, beads of sweat starting to form on his forehead.
That's...
Father Vincent began, but he was cut off by a sudden voice from the doorway.
Be paid in blood.
All three of them turned sharply, eyes wide, as Ruby stood at the entrance to the chapel. She had a journal in her hands, its pages slightly worn from age.
I'm sorry.
Ruby said, her voice trembling.
I overheard part of what you were saying, but I think I know where this is from.
Father Vincent was taken aback.
Ruby, where did you...
Ruby stepped forward, holding the journal out to them.
I found this in the church library just now. It's old. Very old. It's about something that happened decades ago in another parish, but it sounds so much like what's happening here.
Father Raphael, still shaken, glanced at the journal in Ruby's hands, his eyes flicking between her and the box. He knew something was wrong. There was a deep sense of dread growing in his gut, and Ruby's appearance, her words, only added to that feeling. Ruby flipped open the journal, her hands steady despite the tension in the room. She pointed to a passage near the middle, and Father Vincent leaned in to read it, his breath catching, as the words seemed to mirror the inscription on the box.
When the stone was unearthed, the dark force it contained began to stir. The keeper of the stone must face the consequences, for the curse demands a toll. Blood will flow as the keeper's burden becomes their own. Only the one who first held the stone can break the curse, but at a terrible cost.
Father Vincent's voice was barely a whisper.
It's the same. It's exactly the same.
Ruby nodded, her voice low.
It's like a record of the same event happening again. In the journal, it says that the church was never the same. After that incident, people disappeared. The windows were changed like they are here, and the parish was never able to undo the curse. They couldn't even explain how the people had vanished.
Father Raphael turned slowly toward the windows, his face drained of color. Alice followed his gaze, and they all watched as the faces in the stained glass seemed to move again. Their hollow eyes were now fixed on them, their mouths opening and closing as if trying to speak. Father Raphael's voice was tight, full of dread.
The curse is already spreading. The windows, they're showing us what happened in that other parish.
Ruby, still holding the journal, looked from one priest to the other, her expression serious.
It says here that the only way to stop it is to return the stone to where it came from. But the one who does that, they won't be the same afterward.
Father Vincent felt the weight of those words settle over him like a heavy fog. The stone, the eye of Astarte, was the key, but it wasn't just a matter of putting it back. There was something much worse in store for whoever tried to undo the curse.
We have to put it back,
Father Vincent said, though his voice faltered. He wasn't sure who he was speaking to, himself or the others.
but at what cost?
Father Raphael shook his head, clearly troubled.
I don't know. But we can't leave it here. If we do, the curse will only get stronger.
Before anyone could speak again, the door to the chapel creaked open. The heavy, eerie feeling in the air thickened. The room was still, the air heavy with tension, when they heard it, the familiar meow of Salem, the cat echoing through the chapel. It was a sound they had all come to dread. When they turned toward the source, their hearts skipped a beat. There stood Salem once again, but this time, he wasn't meowing at the windows or the box. No, he was facing the statue of Pope John Paul II. His body was rigid, his tail straight as a line. The sound of his meowing was sharp, almost frantic, as if he was trying to communicate something. Father Vincent stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest.
Salem?
He whispered, but his voice trailed off as he noticed something strange. The air seemed to shimmer around the cat.
Is he okay?
Alice asked, her voice shaky. Before Father Vincent could respond, something extraordinary happened. The statue of Pope John Paul II seemed to come alive, its marble form glowing faintly in the dim light of the chapel. Then, to their utter astonishment, a soft, glowing figure slowly began to materialize before them. It was delicate, almost translucent, with an ancient, wise face that seemed to radiate both serenity and strength. The spirit floated in midair, its presence so peaceful and calming that it almost felt like a dream.
Do not be afraid.
The spirit said, its voice echoing around them. Though it wasn't coming from any particular direction, it felt as though it was inside their minds, filling their hearts with quiet certainty.
I am one of the first guardians. I have come to guide you.
Father Vincent, his voice thick with disbelief, stepped forward.
A guardian? What do you mean? Who are you?
The spirit's smile was gentle, and it raised a hand as if to calm him.
I am a protector of the ancient relic, the one that you call the box. For centuries it has been guarded by many, but now it is your turn to watch over it, and I have come to help you understand its power.
Alice's eyes widened.
You mean the box? The one that's causing all of this?
The spirit nodded, its glowing form pulsing slightly as though it was breathing.
Yes, the box you now hold contains knowledge and power beyond anything you have seen, but it is not something to be taken lightly. There have been many guardians before you, but none have faced the same challenges you will encounter.
Father Vincent stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with curiosity.
What do you mean? What challenges?
The spirit's expression grew more serious.
The power contained within the box can alter reality itself. It can grant unimaginable strength and wisdom, but it comes at a price. If used recklessly, it can cause great harm. Those who sought to wield it without understanding have brought ruin upon themselves.
Father Vincent swallowed hard, his mind racing.
And what exactly do we need to do? How can we protect the box?
The knowledge within it is meant to be safeguarded,
The spirit explained.
but it is not enough to simply lock it away. You must understand its purpose. You must understand its history.
The spirit's form flickered, and for a moment they all felt a strange sensation, as though the very air around them had shifted. It was as though time itself had bent. The spirit continued.
The box was created long ago by those who foresaw the coming of great darkness. They knew that this power, if abused, would bring calamity. So they entrusted it to a series of guardians, each chosen for their wisdom and their ability to resist temptation. Many tried to open it, to use it for their own gain, but none succeeded.
Father Vincent's heart sank.
So we're supposed to just keep it closed? But the inscription, the warning, it's clear the curse is already here.
Exactly.
the spirit confirmed.
But you must not act out of fear. There is more at play than you can see. The curse is not an ordinary curse. It is tied to the fate of the guardians themselves.
The silence in the room was deafening as the spirit's words sank in. They all stood there, absorbing the weight of what had just been said. After a long pause, Father Vincent spoke, his voice low.
So, what's the next step? How do we handle this? If we keep the box, the curse won't stop, right?
The spirit nodded again.
No, the box cannot be destroyed. The only way to truly protect it is to understand its significance. You must learn from those who came before you. You must study its history.
Alice's eyes flickered nervously toward the windows, where the strange faces in the glass seemed to be watching them.
But what if we're not strong enough? What if we can't handle it?
The spirit's gaze softened.
That is why I have come. The guardians before you faced the same fears, but they had strength, courage, and wisdom. It is within you as well. Trust in yourselves.
Father Raphael looked around at the others, his expression serious.
The knowledge, the power of the box. It's more than we thought, isn't it?
Yes,
The spirit said, its voice soft but firm.
it is a burden, but it is also a gift. But be warned, once you fully understand its power, you will be forever changed.
Salem, still standing near the statue, let out a single low meow, as if to punctuate the spirit's words. The air in the chapel felt heavier now, almost oppressive. The spirit began to fade, its form dissipating like mist in the morning light.
I must go now, but remember, you are not alone. I will be watching, always.
And with that, the spirit was gone, leaving only a lingering sense of peace and dread in its wake. Father Raphael stood there, his mind reeling. He looked at Father Vincent, Alice, and Ruby, who had all stayed silent throughout the conversation. Salem was still meowing, but now his voice seemed less frantic, as if the cat, too, had received some sort of message. Father Raphael turned back toward the box on the altar. The weight of what they had just learned pressed down on him. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but one thing was certain. They had a purpose now. The box had chosen them, and they had to be ready to face whatever came next. When the spirit disappeared, leaving the group in stunned silence, the weight of their mission settled heavily on Father Vincent's shoulders. The air felt thick, the echoes of the spirit's words still lingering in the chapel. Father Vincent took a deep breath, looking around at his companions, Alice, Ruby, Father Raphael. They all wore the same look of awe and uncertainty, but there was also resolve in their eyes. Now the challenge ahead was no longer a distant fear. It was a reality they could not ignore.
This won't be easy,
Father Vincent said, his voice steady.
but together we can do it.
Father Raphael nodded solemnly. We have to keep faith. This is bigger than any of us alone. But with each other, and with the guidance we've been given, we'll find a way. Ruby's quiet determination shone through.
We've come this far. We can't back down now.
In the following weeks, the group worked tirelessly, and their sense of purpose grew with each passing day. The threat of the box was always in the back of their minds, but they were united in their resolve. They knew they had to keep this power contained and safe. The first step was to return the box to where it truly belonged. Father Raphael suggested placing it back at the base of the statue of Pope John Paul II. The spirit had mentioned the box's significance to that place, as if the statue had been guarding it for centuries. With careful hands, Father Vincent and Father Raphael carried the box to the foot of the statue and placed it gently on the ground. Alice and Ruby stood by, silent but supportive. Father Vincent turned to Father Raphael.
This feels right.
He said quietly. Father Raphael agreed, his eyes focused on the box. But we can't just leave it here unprotected. Together, they sealed the box into a stone base beneath the statue. The seal was both physical and spiritual. They spent hours ensuring the seal was tight, murmuring prayers as they worked. The chapel felt charged with energy, as if holding its breath. When they finished, they stepped back. The box was sealed, resting beneath the statue's watchful eyes. The room felt quieter, though unease lingered. Father Vincent looked at the others.
We've done all we can for now, but the challenge isn't over. We must be vigilant.
Father Raphael placed a hand on Father Vincent's shoulder.
We'll do it together.
Ruby nodded.
We'll protect it no matter the cost.
And so they knew their task had only just begun. The box was sealed, but its power was far from over. As long as they stood together, they had a chance to keep the darkness at bay. The days following the sealing of the mysterious box beneath the statue were marked by a strange, almost ethereal calm in Pineview. The haunting faces in the stained glass had reverted to their serene forms, and the heavy, oppressive air that had hung in St. Gabriel seemed to dissipate. The events of that fateful night lingered in the minds of Father Vincent, Alice, Harold, Ruby, and Father Raphael like an unshakable shadow. But they also brought a renewed sense of unity and purpose. Father Vincent found himself spending more time in quiet reflection. Every evening, after the last candle had been extinguished, he knelt before the altar, the statue of Pope John Paul II towering above him. He prayed for strength, not just for himself, but for all of them. His gray hair, once a testament to years of gentle service, now seemed like a crown of wisdom earned through fire. The burden of their shared responsibility was heavy, but he carried it with a quiet dignity. Alice, ever the practical librarian, took on the task of researching the box's symbols and the cryptic history behind it. With Ruby's help, they pored over ancient texts and parish records, finding fragmented mentions of a relic of power that had passed through other towns like Pineview, leaving tales of mystery and caution in its wake. Each discovery added another layer to the story and another layer of responsibility to their shoulders. One evening, while they worked in the rectory, Alice paused, staring at a faded parchment.
This passage,
She said, her voice tinged with awe.
it talks about guardians who stood against the darkness. Just like us, they were ordinary people, bound by extraordinary circumstances.
Ruby leaned over her brown hair, catching the light of the lantern.
It says here that they were tested, not just by external forces, but by their own fears and doubts. That's what makes them worthy.
Alice nodded, her black hair brushing against her cheek.
It's comforting, isn't it, to know we're not alone in this.
Harold, the ever-pragmatic blacksmith, played his part by fortifying the chapel's doors and windows.
If something comes knocking again,
He said gruffly.
it's not getting in without a fight.
His strong hands, usually so steady, sometimes betrayed a tremble when he thought about the faces in the stained glass. But he found solace in action, in the tangible strength of wood and iron. Salem, the wiry mutt who had first alerted them to the box's presence, became a constant presence at the chapel. His once carefree demeanor was tempered by a quiet vigilance. It was as if he understood the gravity of the situation, standing guard like a sentinel, his reddish-brown fur gleaming in the sunlight that now seemed less menacing. Father Raphael, the elder priest, was a wellspring of wisdom and reassurance. His sharp eyes, framed by bifocal glasses, missed nothing. Yet behind his calm exterior, he wrestled with his own doubts. The inscription on the box haunted Father Raphael, especially the part about the keeper paying a price in blood. He couldn't shake the thought, and one evening, as he and Father Vincent walked through the empty chapel, he shared his concerns.
The curse may be dormant for now,
Father Raphael said, his voice low.
but we can't ignore what it demands. If the seal ever breaks, someone will have to pay the price.
Father Vincent met his gaze, his gray eyes steady.
Then we'll be ready. Whatever it takes, we'll protect this parish.
Weeks passed, and the storm that arrived one fateful night would be their greatest test. A violent thunderstorm ravaged Pineview, rattling windows and shaking the earth with its fury. Lightning illuminated the chapel and its surroundings, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Salem meowed furiously at the doors, his hackles raised. Awakened by the noise, Father Vincent rushed to the chapel, where he found Alice, Ruby, Harold, and Father Raphael already gathered. Their faces were pale but determined. The storm seemed almost alive, as if testing the strength of their resolve.
It's the box.
Alice said, her voice barely audible over the howling wind.
I can feel it.
Father Raphael nodded grimly.
The seal is holding, but the storm, It's a warning.
As if in response, a deafening clap of thunder shook the ground and the chapel doors flew open. For a moment, the group froze, their hearts pounding in unison. But there was no intruder, just the storm's fury spilling into the sacred space. Father Vincent stepped forward, his voice firm.
We've faced worse than this. We won't falter now.
The group rallied, closing the doors against the storm and securing the chapel. The hours that followed were tense, but the storm eventually passed, leaving a renewed stillness in its wake. The box remained untouched, its seal unbroken, a testament to their determination. In the days that followed, a subtle change came over the group. The fear that had once gripped them was replaced by a quiet confidence. They had faced the storm and the darkness within themselves and emerged stronger for it. Father Vincent continued to lead the parish with a renewed sense of purpose. His sermons were infused with a quiet wisdom that resonated deeply with the congregation. Alice and Ruby expanded their research, uncovering not only the history of the box, but also stories of other guardians who had succeeded in their task. Harold, ever the protector, ensured the chapel remained a sanctuary in every sense of the word. Salem, their unlikely hero, became a symbol of vigilance and loyalty, often found sitting near the statue, his eyes bright with an understanding that seemed almost human. As the seasons changed, the events of that fateful day became a whispered story among the townsfolk, a tale of mystery and faith, of ordinary people who rose to extraordinary challenges. But for those who had lived it, it was more than a story. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the bonds that could form in the face of the unknown. Life in Pineview returned to its quiet rhythm, punctuated by the tolling of the church bell each morning. But in the hearts of Father Vincent, Alice, Harold, Ruby, and Father Raphael, the memory of their shared journey burned brightly, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, light could prevail. And as long as they stood together, they knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead.